Natalie Portman's return in Thor: Love and Thunder has many fans curious about how her version of Thor will differ from what we've seen before. It's a bit confusing though, because on the surface, her character Jane Foster seemed unlikely to ever return after the events of Thor: The Dark World. It'll be an interesting reunion as she'll appear as the Mighty Thor, whether temporary or permanent in the MCU. Things get even more confusing when you consider that Hela destroyed Mjolnir in Ragnarok. This leaves lots of questions when considering the method in which Jane will become the Mighty Thor. Her options appear to be Mjolnir, Stormbreaker, or just something entirely new as her weapon. Jane using Mjolnir. During Jane Foster's run in The Mighty Thor written by Jason Aaron, she wielded Mjolnir after Odin's son became unworthy. Thanks to the enchantment placed by Odin, it gave her the powers of Thor. However, since Hela destroyed the weapon in Ragnarok, how could it really appear? Well, the most likely ways are to introduce a multiversal version of Mjolnir, like in Avengers Endgame, or simply have the character use the shattered remains of Mjolnir to create a new one. During Jason Aaron's run on The Mighty Thor, the hammer of Ultimate Thor fell to Earth 616 and was utilized by Volstagg after Odin's son refused it. This hammer transformed Volstagg into a figure known as the War Thor. He fought Jane and lost, and later suffered another defeat at the hands of Mangog. Later on, the hammer was heavily damaged by Mangog, and Volstagg was unable to transform into the War Thor. During the War of the Realms event, Jane Foster takes the damaged Mjolnir and is able to reunite the fragments into a temporary replacement for the hammer. This lasts long enough to help Jane defeat Malekith and save the various realms from defeat. After these events, she becomes the new Valkyrie using a new weapon from the fragments of the Ultimate Thor hammer. Since director Taika Waititi has stated that Jason Aaron's Thor run is a huge inspiration, it would be surprising if he didn't read the War of Realms crossover and consider using certain events from it, like Jane using a broken Mjolnir. Jane Foster using Stormbreaker. Originally known from Marvel Comics as the weapon of Beta Ray Bill, Stormbreaker was reintroduced to audiences during Infinity War. Within the MCU, the weapon was forged as a new weapon for Thor. Originally intended to be his weapon once he became the King of Asgard, the weapon augments Thor's natural abilities and provides him access to the Bifrost at will. This is a huge difference to Mjolnir, as that weapon, according to Odin, was simply a tool to focus his powers. Now, Jane could technically use Stormbreaker since it lacks a worthiness enchantment, although the power might kill her. During a conversation with the Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor stated that none of them were strong enough to wield Stormbreaker. He said, "Your bodies would crumble as your minds collapse into madness." The only exception to this was Captain America, as he briefly held Stormbreaker in Avengers Endgame. It's worth noting that Stormbreaker in the MCU is visually based upon the hammer used by Ultimate Thor. This weapon later appears in Earth 616 and empowers Volstagg during the War of the Realms crossover events. A new weapon. Another option is that a new weapon is given to Jane altogether, even if it's the least likely option. Speculation online has mentioned potentially bringing a Vibranium Mjolnir, something created from Stark tech, and other weapons that Thor has used in the past, such as Jarnbjorn, the battle axe that he used once he became unworthy. For the possibility of a weapon made of Vibranium or by Wakandans, it doesn't really make too much sense because Jane would need a relationship with T'Challa or at least Shuri. A Stark tech weapon is mostly seen in speculation, attempting to connect Thor: Love and Thunder with Thor's clone Ragnarok from the Civil War comic event. In our opinion, the introduction of a new weapon would be interesting, but kinda lack logic within the continuity of the MCU. It makes way more sense to just rebuild Mjolnir from the shattered remains in Norway, with the help of a character like Valkyrie, or a new character that is yet to be introduced. The real question though is, how long will Jane Foster's run as Thor in the MCU last? Which weapon would you like to see Jane wield in Thor: Love and Thunder? Let us know your thoughts down below, and for everything on Marvel and pop culture, be sure to subscribe to HN Entertainments.